You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number and an engineer will be right with you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from IVOXY Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I'm your host, Matt. We're all network guys, Yeti, and alongside me is my co-host, Matt Cozzolino.
I tell you a UDP joke, but you might not get it.
And each episode, we dive into the wide range of technologies that make up this beautiful sandbox called IT that we all play in. We share our hopes and dreams, opinions both positive and critical alike, all with a touch of empathy, because at the end of the day, we all need a seat on that couch. All right, today we're joined by Jeremy Goosen, a senior consulting engineer on our networking team here at IVOXY. It is Jeremy's first appearance on DCT, and we're really excited to have him. Jeremy, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making
Jeremy.
some time. I know the networking side of the house is pretty stacked up lately, so I know it's been a long time coming trying to coordinate everyone here, and definitely appreciate your time. So, Jared, I want you just tell us a little bit about yourself so anybody who might not know who you are out there listening.
Well, I'm an engineer, a networking engineer. I've been, in the IT industry since 2000. Worked for some of the bigger players in the area, but I really love consulting. The ability to
kinda
focus,
nice, isn't it?
to focus on one project and not have to worry about all the layer 8 stuff around it is wonderful.
Layer 8, that's the first time I've ever heard that. You wouldn't be talking about users, would you?
Hey,
Management.
users, budget meetings, all that other fun stuff. I don't have to worry about any of that.
That's a nice OSI modification right there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to use that. Well, the reason why we have Jeremy on today is because we're going to talk about our, a little different take on the data center right now, and that's basically enterprise networking, but in a small to medium business space, which is a lot of what we do at IVOXY when it comes to networking. So it's a very important topic, and as well when you talk about security, which is on everybody's mind. More so, I mean, even in the 2000s when we were talking about SQL Slammer and NIMDA and all these, self-propagating worms. But now security is, I think, even more challenging because despite the technological advances in the network and the server arenas, now it's the users that we have to protect from themselves more often than not, where phishing is really a major entry point, and that leads to segmenting the network and things like that. So, Jeremy, why don't you kick us off in terms of, segmenting users from the data center? What do we usually see? What have we seen? Where are those pitfalls, and where do we go from there?
Well, the first thing you want to start off is you don't want to give anybody access they don't need. So if users don't need access to the SQL databases, make sure they can't get there. If they don't need access to the front-end web servers from the inside, make sure they don't get there. This is, very basic stuff to try and protect yourself from the users.
Are you seeing that a lot out there, though? Are you seeing you walking in and everybody's on VLAN 1?
Yeah, I have seen that. Not as much as I used to, but again, it's a lot of companies that are growing up, so they have growing pains. What they start off with is a bunch of servers and a bunch of users. They plug it all in, and it just ends up working.
So
Works
it's that,
for a little while.
It's that VLAN 1. It's that we're all on a /16 network. It's that kind of stuff we walk into and see, right?
Yeah.
What's some of the other ones you see? What's I guess the weirdest one?
Everything being on VLAN 1. I've seen the database servers, the web servers. I mean, they were doing one-to-one NATs from the internet to VLAN 1 where all the users were.
So no DMZ.
No, and you need those things, especially in today's age. Today even having users on a layer 3 switch and just using ACLs to protect your data center is not enough.
Right.
You need the layer 7 intelligence in between the users and the data center.
So there's a question I got there. How do you feel about running your default gateway to the firewall? Like just leveraging the firewall for that default gateway and make it the router for everything.
Well, some manufacturers are already doing that. With Meraki, you put an MX and you put a couple switches behind it, and it's the gateway. You do
I
have.
would assume you run into scale challenges at that point, right?
You
I mean,
do.
a smaller.
You
know,
do.
that's definitely the big S in SMB. I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, firewalls that can move a lot of packets are expensive.
Right.
So if you're going to have your file server on one side and your users on the other, you got to make sure that firewall can move that data. Yeah.
So in the absence of the firewall, okay, so you say firewalls that can move a lot of packets are expensive. That's absolutely true. And so let's say, okay, fine, we're going to leverage the firewall for the edge, but we want firewall E behavior for internal route. We want to segment our networks, right? We want to have a VLAN for our servers and a VLAN for our users and a VLAN for our wireless users and some for maybe a DMZ, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to secure that, but hey, I don't have the money for a layer 7 firewall that can push all those packets across. How do I pull that back down to a layer 3 routing device internally, but still take advantage, or how do I effectively secure those VLANs from each other?
Well, you think about segmentation. As far as the data you want to most protect. If it's somebody comes in with ransomware, what can you afford to lose? Or what can you recover? So, and that being said, you take your data, put it in red, yellow, and green. What's okay if we lose? What's okay if we not?
Yeah.
And then you have to put the stuff that's red behind a firewall. It is what it is.
So I'm not using ACLs or control lists on a layer 3 router.
Well, I don't think that cuts it anymore, right?
No, because so you're gonna poke holes in your ACLs because you need to allow your users to access the data center. Well, some of these modern malware, ransomware, it's going over normal ports.
I've seen data egress with DNS queries. Like I query my domain that I'm nefariously working out of with the string.mydomain.com, and it's all of that data I'm trying to exfil, so I can just record that DNS entry.
Yeah, it's scary time.
Well, okay, so you've got firewalls that may or may not be a fit for your environment. How do you enforce users to make sure they're in the network, that they're not jumping ports that might go to their desk, they're not changing their phone port, just plugging into a free switch out there? I think, Jeremy, you were just involved in a project where you kind of implemented something like this and were pretty excited by the results.
I did. So I just did a deployment with Aruba ClearPass, and Cisco ICE will do the same thing. What they do is they leverage 802.1x authentication, which has been around a long time, but it hasn't really. I haven't seen it implemented a lot in the medium to small business space. But the advantages of moving from a VLAN 1 architecture to a segmented networks by using Active Directory to separate those users out and put those guys in the correct VLAN is a powerful tool. That saves you from tracking down switch ports. That saves you from running down jacks, crawling under desks, trying to match numbers that go back to the patch panels. It saves you a lot of work.
So you can just take a single switch port config and push it across everything, and then based on who logs in, they get their special level of access that way?
Exactly.
Does that take any client software or anything installed on a workstation, or is it all native to the network?
It's native to the network because it works at layer 2. So it does a radius call. That basically the switch acts as a radius broker to ClearPass or ICE, and so you're interrogating the machine at layer 2. You can look for certificates. You do have to install some software if you want to start checking AV levels, making sure that they got those things installed. But if you want to make sure it's got a certificate to be on the network, you can do those kinds of things.
So if that agent has crashed or is unhealthy, because I think anybody who's dealt with an antivirus solution and worrying about keeping them up to date, and then not only the definitions, but now the client needs an update. Oh, that crashed, and that failed, and now I've got this orphaned machine out there that I've got to go out and get on my feet. I got to get off my soft, comfortable, and go to it. And hopefully it's in the office and not a remote
your
guy.
couch, not your.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there you go.
If said machine is unable to start its agent or it's in an unhealthy state, does that prevent it from getting access to the network?
To a point, you just throw them into a quarantine VLAN, or you can even throw them into. You can be really nice and throw them into a guest VLAN, so where that machine can then just go to the internet and that's it. But a lot of the times, I see users and customers put things into a quarantine VLAN that has access to the AV server, and then also
Software
has
updates,
access to the domain
that kind of
controller.
stuff.
So then, but limited access, right? So that way they can do it. They get a group policy update. They can get their antivirus stuff that they need.
You can still troubleshoot.
Yeah, troubleshoot. I mean, it's help desk stuff, and at that point, you can train your help desk staff to go, all right, well, we know what this guy's has. We know this guy's machine has a problem. He's in the quarantine VLAN. Somebody either goes out there or they have him connect to the guest network and they do WebEx or something.
And
Sure.
802.1x has been around for a minute, so it's not like back in the day when, hey, I want to roll this new antivirus solution and here's this big fat client that takes up 17 gigs of memory. It's not that kind of thing. It's all like baked into the OS. And
Yeah, it's a very baked solution. You'd be surprised at the devices that support 802.1x off.
I feel like we've cycled about agents more than we have about whether an egg is bad for you or healthy at this point. I've heard companies not talk about not use the word agent because it's a bad word. And then it's like, oh, we have a lightweight agent. Well, everybody's a lightweight, but it sounds like
the agent's
for
the same
real,
size.
this one's
just got
okay, Jer.
more resources.
That's true. They're probably just as fat, except our computers have just loosened the belt a bit, so there's room for it, right?
There you go.
Well, and so just to remind everyone, this is a technology that you crawl, walk, and then you can run. But you do not start off with turning on antivirus and segmenting users and whatever else you want to do right off the bat.
I think that's one of the ones that gets people in trouble. They're like, yeah, we'll do this and we'll have it implemented like tomorrow.
Yeah, and they think they're going to spike the football when really they just end up working all weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This protects an office from Joe Clever, who's going to walk in with his 5-port Linksys router and plugs in and give himself more switch ports at his desk, right?
Good luck, dude. It ain't going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'd also think that this is just one layer of the security architecture, right? You still want some firewalling, you still want some antivirus, some security on the endpoint, as well as the segmentation between everything and the checking of the client and the workstation and where it lands, right?
It's got to all be layered, right?
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet at any means. Nice thing is, hopefully, you got to think that one of the primary means of infiltration is, I'm going to click this email link from my aunt, and it's not from her, and I'm going to punch my password in, but downloads a payload or whatever. At that point, you hope your antivirus springs into action and doesn't let you download it or execute it.
Yeah,
without
there's a whole
first.
different set of problems to solve there.
Well, hopefully
Yeah.
the firewall will stop the malware from going over to the data center, because you'll have some layer 7 intelligence between the user and the data center.
And still, I think reverse proxies or proxy devices can be an effective tool also, because if the only way I can go to something on port 80 or 443 or anything is through that guy, and that has the definitions updated, hopefully it can catch anything malicious as well. But it's just brutal the way we've turned from these self-propagating worms into, hey, let's just make so and so believe that this is a legitimate email and just click. It's very tough to protect users from themselves, even with modern OS, making you put your password in 8 times for everything, because now I'm just desensitized to putting my password in.
Mm-hmm.
And even if something pops up when I don't expect it to, well, that's normal. It just pops up all the time. I'm going to put my password in, and boom, you're rooted.
Yeah.
All right. So what network of equipment am I picking here? I mean, we've got the office, we've got the data center, 2 very different footprints, I would assume. What decisions? What data am I needing to?
10 gig switch is a 10 gig switch is a 10 gig switch, right?
Sure.
So when you're evaluating equipment, you also have to be honest with yourself of how much free time you have, and how much of an expert you are in networking. there's products out there. Meraki tries to make things a little simpler, but you can still get yourself in trouble with those. And then you have like an ASA or a Palo Altos, um, and then you have your switching. You can go with the Catalyst and the Nexus in the data center. You need the simpler firewalls like the Merakis, I believe, play really good in the user space, branch offices. But once you go into the data center, you need flexibility. You need that Swiss Army knife of device that can build a tunnel over just about any any interface that it has. Meraki's, you're going to be very limited on what you can do because a lot of them only have 2 WAN ports, and that's all you get. You do get a fun SD-WAN solution when you're deploying those, and so it works great for branch offices. Connect everybody up together. They have one link going into the data center. You got your ASAs over there with your Nexus and your storage and your servers. And then with the users, you got your Meraki with your switches and your wireless and guest access.
Now, does that solution integrate with like the 802.1x that you were talking about?
It does.
Okay.
You can do all that. It's pretty fun.
I've seen a lot of Meraki wireless. That's actually one of the ones that I think they do fairly well. And I was actually kind of curious, is 802.1x on wireless the same protocol, and does it work the same way? Do you still get to bump them between networks, even though you're connecting to like a single SSID?
I have not played with switching VLANs on SSIDs. I've seen it, but I can't speak to it as far as a direct expert, just because I haven't done it yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to think back when I was playing with this probably 8 years ago, and I want to say that with VLAN tagging on the access point and multiple SSIDs, I think you can have a common join, and then basically you can leverage things like device certificates to push down, and then you can push a deassociation packet, a deauth, to that common, and then it will pick up the assigned as well. I'm pretty sure that's all doable as well. I'm not 1,000% positive, but I'm pretty sure that's possible as well. But yeah, I think that way of pushing around what VLAN a person gets on is great. I mean, I worked my last job. I worked with a staff of help desk who, at that point, when I got hired on, I asked, "What was your networking environment?" And I was told, "Oh, best of breed." Right? I walked in there, and it was a bunch of Netgear switches.
Yay.
And what happened was the help desk staff was so used to ports going bad, like physically going bad on these switches, that going into the data center and just swapping a patch to a different port on the switch was just another Tuesday. and so I implemented VLANs, and we went down that direction. I had printer VLANs and things like this, and I told help desk, no touchy, because ports matter. On top of that, these are now Cisco switches, so the idea of a port going bad randomly is pretty unlikely. Not that hardware doesn't go bad, but I mean, we're talking about, how many physical ports have you seen go bad on a Cisco switch in your careers? Probably on 1 or 2 hands, right?
Yeah, I've seen it once or twice, and then I immediately get on the phone with tech, and I'm RMA.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still know they would go in there out of instinct and start, they're having problems down at their I'm just going to switch their port. I'm like, you need to take that out of your troubleshooting toolbox right now.
Doesn't work that way anymore. Yeah.
Not the thing. So yeah, that was fun. That was my main concern when we started talking about 802.1x, is that if you don't have the headcount for staff, for networking, it sounds like you can design yourself into a bit of a work overload if you've got people plugging in here or there and their ports are getting shut off, right?
Well, with the 802.1x, if you have somebody come in and help you get it set up, it pretty much runs itself after that. Just make sure to keep these devices patched up. You don't want to run into code issues and incompatibility issues. But once it's set up and the users are in their correct subnets, in the correct AD groups, and the AD groups are tied to a VLAN, once that's all done, it's done. You can plug them in literally anywhere.
And I'm guessing the auditing and the logging is pretty robust.
Oh, it's much better than what you're going to get with traditional. I'm just going to make this a user phone port, and everybody just kind of plugs in, and then I'll mark the printer ports and I'll mark the wireless ports. The fun part is you can use these devices to profile the device. So if it recognizes a certain MAC address string, it's going to go, oh, that's a Polycom. Oh, that's a Meraki. Oh, that's a printer. That's a this. That's a that. And it'll put it in there based on that. It'll put it in the correct VLAN. So it to me, I think it makes your life simpler significantly. But you have to implement it well.
But this is something that is not too big of an apple to bite off for a small to medium business, though, either. Is what you're saying.
With proper help getting it set up in the first place. I could see this turning into shelfware if
you don't have someone to put that foundation in, right?
Yeah, you need somebody to show you the ropes right off the bat, because it's a scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
Oh,
like you said, I'm going to implement it. Oh, wait a minute, I haven't done any antivirus, but I've enabled all those policies, and that way nobody's compliant, and they're all stuck in this, limbo VLAN.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and they decided to deploy it all at once.
I got one for you. If you've got one of the things I hear all the time is like, let's push layer 3 all the way out to the closets, all the way out to as far out as I can, and make my whole interconnectivity between all my IDFs routed. Do you see that? Is that a thing you'd want to do if you had your perfect network to own and manage and run?
I guess it would depend on how large the building is, or how large the user base is. If it's a couple hundred users per floor, yeah, layer 3 routed access layer is fine.
Can I just jump in from
Yes.
a non-networking standpoint? I always like to go with whenever somebody says, here's a cool technological solution, right? My first question is, what are you trying to accomplish? Why? And in this case, and I know the answer is it depends, Jeremy, right? Depends on the size, but is it really about managing the size of your broadcast domains? Is that really what we're going towards here, Kazo or Jer?
I mean, I kind of think so. You get a little bit of a smaller impact. You can get some meet me networks, some routed networks between your IDFs, and it seems like it'd be a good idea.
So it's protecting you from a storm and floor that slams all the way back to your IDF on the long haul.
Yeah, that kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel about that, Jeremy? I mean, is it just size based?
It's size based. So one of the other fun things that you can do is you can then introduce some dynamic routing. So say you want to add another floor or another IDF, or you took over another part of the building. Instead of extending layer 2, you can extend your layer 3 network and use some dynamic routing, and then the rest of the networks just know about these things automatically. With layer 2 networks in a larger environment, they get really big. It gets, think of like the suburbs. It just kind of sprawls out, and before you know it, you got a guy on the 4th floor and the guy on the 1st floor on the same subnet. They're trying to talk to each other. Some guy loops a port. It takes down the whole building.
Your surface area for something going sideways is a little bigger at that point. Yeah.
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 Are you making an argument for dynamic routing in small to medium environments? Would you, or would you typically go static routing? Me, I'm unless you're rapidly deploying new networks, or maybe I would say pulling that layer 3 out into the access layer. That makes sense, because then you don't have to go touch everything. I am a proponent of static routing because my networks are known, so why do I need to dynamically learn anything? Go ahead and tear the server guy apart here, guys.
Yeah,
I'm giving you an underhand and hit me with it if you can.
It all depends on the size. It all depends on the environment. If you're in an office with 50 users, you don't need that. You don't need any of that. You have a couple switches. You have a firewall. You're going to the internet. You're going over the data center. You're doing your thing. If you have a building with 1,000 people in it, yeah, that makes more sense. But most cases, no. Medium to small, no.
Where do you draw that line?
Well, I would say this. Forget the access layer. Maybe to your point, Jared, I would agree. Static out there. Data center-wise, now you're talking NSX, with maybe you're generating a lot of lab environments, or you're spinning up
Mhm.
demo or test, or you're restoring something, and you want to expose those networks to the rest of your environment, you could
Well, that's
theoretically pair between the data center and the core, right, Matt?
yeah. So that's like when I do my NSX work, that's what I do is I'm leaning on BGP to do the route learning specifically because I want to spin up a network and tear it down and spin it up and tear it down and spin it up and tear
And
it
not to
down.
get too into the weeds, you prefer BGP to something like OSPF in the internal data center?
I prefer BGP for NSX because NSX only supports BGP.
All right, today I learned. Thank you.
T specifically asterisk.
V had other ones, right?
NSX V supported OSPF and BGP, but
Okay.
NSXT they don't have the OSPF support today. I
Interesting.
believe it's coming, but it's
I would
only
assume so.
only BGP today. And truthfully, like when you start looking at AWS and Azure and all of the cloud providers, they're using BGP up there as well.
Yeah, but I'm Jeremy. I mean, support me or correct me if I'm wrong here. I would say that border gateway protocol is meant for the border and not necessarily internally in most cases.
Well, there's different versions of BGP. You can do a iBGP. I'd have to look it up again. But
So I was always under the impression that BGP was actually BGP, and it's just that when you use it on the edge, then it's E in air quotes BGP, and when
E
you
as an
use
external?
it internally, it's I BGP.
Oh,
Yeah? Is
Yeah.
it?
And
Is that appropriate?
It's kinda. Yeah, it's kinda like that. I mean, if you wanted to go look at the RFCs, you might see a little something different, but it's close enough. And it's BGP is a very good protocol. I really like using it. It's
how old is that? I mean, we're talking 20, 30 years,
Oh,
right?
man, it's baked. So is
Yeah.
is OSPF. But when you're gonna interface with the carriers, you're gonna be using BGP. And so if you don't know how to use BGP, and you're gonna be a network guy, you need to learn it.
AKA, don't ask Matt Yeti about it, but rather Mr. Kozlina or Mr. Gosen for sure.
Just keep us on Slack or chat or something like
There
that.
you go.
Send me the config. I'll help you.
So
From a subnet thing, Matt.
yeah, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
going to ask.
Are you a hater of the 192.168.1? If you do cringe when you jump on Wi-Fi and you get plopped onto that subnet.
The funniest one for me was Meraki's walled garden self-natted wireless solution actually uses 10.0/8. So having my entire data center running on the 10 network, subnetted down, hop on Wi-Fi somewhere else, and I can't get connected because suddenly everything I'm trying to talk to is air quotes layer 2 adjacent is a pain in the butt.
Yep.
But
you
actually,
could theoretically run into that in any combination, whether that's Meraki
right.
or
I mean, RFC 1918 is only so big.
Right. That public Wi-Fi could be in the same subnet as what you're trying to VPN to, and it's over.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never get over there.
Even on your home network, there's always going to be that overlap.
Hey, can we, at the risk of exposing security, maybe you can obfuscate a little bit. Jeremy, what is your main subnet on your home network?
I think it's 1010.
1010?
Yeah.
What's yours, Kazo?
At home, 1021 for me, and 1022 for the parents. And you're the only weirdo that's on 192 still.
I am 192.168, but it's not a .1. Don't worry, it's not that.
1.1.
It's close, but it's not a .1. Yeah. I didn't realize I was setting myself up there.
That's because that's a good segue though. That when you're doing layer 3 to the closets or layer 3 to the IDFs, or when you're laying out an address space for an entire new office or branch of offices, there's a lot of work that can go into and that should go into that address layout, isn't there?
Well, we're in the process of it right now at a project that we're in the middle of where we have an existing environment that does need to partially come over to the new site, but the new site is completely greenfield and will be built out with new subnets.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, what kind of things do you think about when you're helping someone do address space layout and come up with that new block of addresses for whatever thing they're building?
You look at the size of the company and how many total IP addresses you think will ever be used at this site. But in the end, you want the network to be simple. And so, I mean, if you have to take a /16 and assign that to a site, then you know what? If anything is coming from the 10150, you know where it's at. You know it's in the data center. And you give yourself plenty of room for growth in each one of the sites, even though it might be completely overkill. It makes your life simpler, in my opinion.
Well, that's kind of the classic CCNA question, right? Like, design this network. What subnets do you need to use?
Yeah. You mean this many hosts?
Yeah.
No, I'm beyond that. I don't have time for that. What I do is let's take what makes sense. If say you got 10 branches, 10, 11, 10, 12, 10, 13, unless you have a designator for that site. Sometimes they have site numbers. You can kind of tie it along with that and make it pretty and make it fun. But
I'm a huge fan of going right to the requirements and working backwards from there. But sometimes, and some people they get excited about the proposition of using this subnet, or I'm going to do a /22 because it's different than a /24, and then they ram that in regardless of what the requirements are. I'm sure we've all seen that out there.
Mm-hmm.
It might have even been like that earlier in my career too. But
I guess do you think it's important to line stuff up so that you can carve out that /16 and assign it to a site, and then carve
absolutely
/18s and assign it to this service and that kind of stuff?
Yes. You don't want to have like in one site. You don't want to have like 15 different /16s available to the data center, right? It's got this many things. It's like, no, man. All you're doing is making your life harder. There's so many things that you can do to when you have a greenfield situation to make yourself to not, I don't know, make sure you have a weekend that you're not spending troubleshooting your own networking stuff.
Yeah.
That's always been my reluctance to throw in NSX into my quote unquote home production lab, right? Because at the end of it all, my wife needs internet. Like we all do, right?
Mm-hmm,
I can't break
That's why
things
Plex
that
hasn't moved over yet.
Right. Things like that.
And my wife has
Yes.
zero patience for technical issues. She's like,
right.
My husband's in IT. What's the problem here?
Why is this broken?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeremy, have you seen anything else out there that's really made your eyes pop out and said, boy, if I could have been in this conversation with you, Mr. Customer, from the start, I would have steered you in a vastly different direction? It's something really kind of a never seen that before alteration here for this little mini segment. Have you? What is really a yowzer that you've seen out there?
I have to think about that for a second. There's been a lot of things.
I totally put you on the spot.
Oh, you did, and so
I do.
What I'd have to think about is, again, going back to the example of when I go in, I plug into the network, I get an IP address, and their production databases are a couple IP addresses away.
Yeah.
The default gateway, I've seen it to where a misconfigured server, somebody fat fingered it, took over the gateway for the entire network, entire office, data center included, and nobody could figure it out.
Yep.
And the guy who did it's just sitting there, well, I don't know, and it was just a simple matter of, I believe they put a /22 for VLAN 1, and the guy chose the wrong gateway and chose the wrong IP address.
Yeah.
That's
kind of like a DHCP server getting thrown on their rogue. That's a painful one.
Oh yeah, all those kinds of things, and that's where VLANing. If you're on VLAN 1 and your servers and your users are on the same thing, you need to give us a call and talk to us, because that's just you're setting yourself up for problems.
Awesome. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Cozzolino?
Well, I was gonna say I got one fun question for you. I was gonna say most people have heard of RFC 1918. Jeremy, what's your favorite RFC?
1918.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read RFC 2324?
No.
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 It's HTCPCP, the Hypertext Coffee Pot Control Protocol.
Oh.
It's a standard.
It's a RFC. It's a legitimate RFC. There's a couple of them out there that are that.
And what is the purpose of said
It's satire. It's
Oh,
used
really? I mean,
it's a legitimate RFC that exists, but it's used this method for brew, and it uses post, and then use this method to get a cup of coffee, and then when the coffee is,
I would assume that's a lot of debate right there in terms of method to extract and everything, because that's holy war territory.
Oh yeah. If
All
you're
right,
offered
fine.
milk, you need to
We'll
take
wrap
it.
up with this. I assume you both are coffee drinkers.
Yeah.
What is your preferred method of extraction?
Someone
Forget
else
time.
makes it.
If you could do it any way you wanted, how would you have it?
I like pour over personally,
Okay.
like with a basket and the paper filter.
The
Boils
really
water, pour it over.
slow pour.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not fancy in any way, shape, or form. I have my little Keurig, but I don't use the plastic ones. I use the ones that have like the little filter built in, so that you feel a little bit better about the environment when you use them. They're all compostable. But I like simple. I just want to go in before I leave in the morning.
Coffee flavored coffee.
Yep. Yeah. I got the French roast ones. Just stick your cup underneath there, put the thing down, go do something else, come back and leave.
True network guy right there. Doesn't matter. Give it to me. Give me the caffeine. I like an espresso extraction, but if I'm especially camping, I can do a mean French press. I find that to be real good.
I read some French press instructions that I want to give a try next time I go out.
Yeah.
So speaking of Keurig,
I'll drink it.
Have you heard? I don't know if they still do this, but about 4 or 5 years ago, I remember it came out. They were doing some really goofy stuff when they came out with a new coffee maker. People were using, I can't believe I'm saying, counterfeit pods. They were using non-Keurig brand.
Draw on the
pods,
top
right?
with a highlighter or something
Yeah,
to get it.
what they did is they put a camera or a scanner in the actual top of the lid when you close it, and it reads the top of that Keurig pod to see, is this a genuine Keurig pod or is it not? And it would not operate if it didn't find a Keurig. So what people were doing was peeling off the label at the top of a real Keurig and taping it to the very top of the Keurig lid with a hole in it, because it's going to punch a hole in it.
DRM.
It was basically coffee DRM. People went nuts. I gotta imagine that they walked it back, but there are enough people out there who are just like, well, I don't know, I'm going to buy Keurig, and they just don't even realize what they're supporting. But yeah, DRM on coffee pods. So be careful, Mr. Goosen. Be careful.
It hasn't bit me yet. It hasn't gotten me yet.
When you call support, they're going to ask you if you're using third-party coffee pots or not. So you got to keep one of them. Yeah, you got to keep, just like the memory or the optics, right? You got to keep one of the legit ones.
Always buy branded SFPs.
There you go.
Yeah, always buy branded Keurigs.
Well, Jeremy, really appreciate you making the time again today and joining us. This was a lot of fun, and I hope we can get you on here again soon.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Thank you for having me.
All right. Again, this is Matt for my co-host, Mr. Cozzolino. We want to thank you for listening to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy. If you've got us on iTunes or Spotify, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. We'd very much appreciate it. If you're not subscribed yet, hit us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Overcast, Spotify. Find us at IVOXY.com. Find us at datacentertherapy.com. If you've got things you want to talk about or want to hear us talk about, give us an email at podcast@ivoxy.com. Until then, for Mr. Goosen, Mr. Cozzolino, I'm Mr. Yeti. Have a great day, everyone.